Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire. I've got Clark Blake with me. Clark's a longtime friend. He's got an episode. In fact, there's 2 episodes with Clark on here, and some of his with Fellowship of Christian Athletes. He's a veteran of the Vietnam War. He's a Recon Marine and all those things. And his son, Brant, became a Marine later and was in Baghdad. Clark, I was listening to my sister, she and her husband served in the Air Force for 6 years. She said, hey, you got to put on the Memorial Day thing last night on PBS, and I watched that, and I watched the one today. And I thought, I've never talked to you about friends that you may have lost in Vietnam, how God's preserved you. I've heard your story, but we've not talked about it. Do you mind telling us a little bit about some of that?
Well, I was supposed to be discharged at the end of my 4 years. I was a sergeant at the time, and they needed NCOs, so they extended my service an additional year. So I went out to California and trained out there in guerrilla warfare for a month or so, and then they shipped me off to Vietnam. And when we got there, it was quite a large group of Marines there, and that's when everyone got their assignments. And I was assigned to a recon team and one other guy, and everyone else went to infantry units. So I reported to Da Nang, and this was just before Easter, and you don't know what to expect. You listen to the guys that have been in country, been on these missions, and you want to pay attention to what they're telling you because, their experiences can save your life, basically.
I'm sure.
And so I went on the first patrol. The patrols they last 5 or 6 days at a clip, and there's no resupply, and you're constantly moving, trying to find out where the Viet Cong or where the North Vietnamese are coming from. And so a result of that is, and it's our job is not to be detected, but to call in a fire mission on the enemy at that point. So I ran 2 patrols in the north, and they gave me my own team, which was 28 miles southwest of Da Nang at a place called An Hoa. And it was just, there were 3 recon teams there. We had a lieutenant that gave us our operation orders. When you planned, he would always call in the team leader to give us exactly where we would be inserted and where he wanted us to be going throughout that time period. So I conducted 23 long-range insertions, 4 or 5 days at a clip. It was tough. It was you're humping in the forest. I lost 15 pounds in the first 3 weeks. I had amoebic dysentery, but you just kept going. I was involved in operations Georgia and Macon, which were large operations that the Marine Corps had involved us in. The things that you carried a rucksack, and your packs weighed 60 to 70 pounds, plus your weapon, 5 loaded magazines, 3 fragmentation grenades. I had to carry all the maps and have an understanding of, number one, how to read those maps, and also to be able to call in a fire mission from an artillery battery that's 15 to 20 miles away from where you are out in the bush. We were always inserted by 2 helicopters and escorted by 2 fighter jets. And in case you get in what's referred to as a hot landing zone, and that they would try to find a way to extract you if they could right then. There was a time when one of the missions, the lieutenant called me in and said, we know that there's a 500-man a North Vietnamese unit where, and we want to put your team in to see if you can find the outer security from that unit. And I kind of questioned the lieutenant. I said, Lieutenant, there's 10 of us and 500 of them. And he properly introduced to me, you are not to question any of the missions. Just shut your mouth and do your job and you'll be fine. Wow. Which I did. And it was funny about that because they dropped us and the jets left, the helicopters left, and we were kind of exposed. And all of a sudden, there was a bunch of small arms fire coming our way. And so we were trying to hump it up to some rock cover. And then we found out that was the outer security unit for the North Vietnamese. And then they did a night extraction to draw us back. And those are kind of hairy because you certainly have to have your position illuminated. But it all worked out. You know, we got back. And it was just that you had to learn to deal with the elements, which is weather. You had no tents. You had your poncho. You had all your gear. You couldn't wear underwear. They wouldn't last 2 days because you sweat so profusely. If you're hauling a 60, 70-pound pack, and this is Southeast Asia, it is definitely hot. So we would set up an observation post every day and then move at night, just before dark, to a new location, which made it sometimes a little hairy, and, so it just was, there were always challenging moments. Just to make a long story short, the last patrol I was on, I was supposed to be there for a year. We had been on this patrol, and it was the one where we had somebody on call that was awake, and you just rotated around and all night long. And so when I woke up, I needed to send a couple guys down to where I knew that there was some water. And I took 2 steps and my leg hit a wire. I knew I hit a booby trap, and it was a Chinese communist hand grenade lodged between 2 sea ration cans, and God protected me without question because it had a defective firing device. And that just was the beginning of everything else that probably could have gone wrong that day. That evening, the radio man, I was sitting next to him, and he was glassing, using binoculars to glass the area. And he saw a large unit of, I guess, Viet Cong, or could have been North Vietnamese, that were heading our way. We felt that we had definitely been detected that they were coming to, attack us. So we set up, we were fortunate to be on higher ground, and you had to make sure that everybody was in a position to protect that higher ground, and that everyone's weapons, and I had to call in an artillery mission as they were coming and getting closer, and it was getting close to dark. And when you call in an artillery mission, this particular mission, I call in the coordinates of where we are and where we want those rounds to go. Well, we were in what's called gun target line. So the rounds had to go over us first, and then to strike the enemy on the other side, which, there's a lot of those accidents, which you call short rounds, that kill a lot of, friendly troops. And again, we were outnumbered 5-6 to 1, and we used Puff the Magic Dragon, which is a C-130 that had automatic Gatling guns in it, that when they fire those rounds, it looks like a hose coming out of the sky.
Wow.
And so you have to be able to give them the coordinates of where the enemy is. And so we were able to drive them back. And after we drove them back far enough, and they sent the choppers out and evacuated us back and out of there. And then 2 jets came in and just pummeled that whole area with 250-pound bombs. So we got out with no casualties. The lieutenant said, I was there 6 months at that point. And then he said, I'm going to send you back to Da Nang for a couple days. And so I went to Da Nang, to my real base camp where all 3rd Marine Division was. And I was sitting on an outdoor john, and there was a piece of paper on the dirt floor, and I just happened to pick it up and looking for some good reading material. And it was a Marine Corps order basically stating that if you had your paper submitted to go to college by such and such a date, you would be discharged, which that was me. I already had an acceptance of a football scholarship to Monroe, Louisiana, to Northeast Louisiana State College. And I had to read that thing 3 or 4 times to make sure that there weren't any errors. I went into the first sergeant and said, First Sergeant, this is a Marine Corps order that fits my profile. And I'd like for you to look at it because I can be discharged. And of course, he said, no, we're shorthanded, like, all first sergeants would probably say. And I just said, no disrespect. I would like to request mass to see the captain, which I did. And he got all my papers out. And within 5 days, I was on a Braniff International jet out of Da Nang, headed to Okinawa. I was in Okinawa for a week, and then was discharged or went to Okinawa, and from Okinawa to Tokyo to Travis Air Force Base in California, was there a week, was discharged on a Friday, and I flew from Travis Air Force Base in California to Fort Lauderdale. My parents picked me up late that night, and on Monday morning, I had already made arrangements for a flight from Fort Lauderdale to Monroe, Louisiana, where I had no idea. I'd never been to the campus. I'd never been to Louisiana. So I got there. I hired a taxi cab to bring me out to the practice field because they had just started 2-a-day practices. And that's when I began my career there at that school. I was blessed in 100 different ways, but again, it was one of those things where God was always involved in the process of watching over me. And I've always been grateful, obviously, to God, but grateful to the Marine Corps too, in the doors that they opened for me. I was 23 at that time, and I was actually the oldest guy on the team as a freshman. So
those are some amazing stories, and I know you've told them to your school, the students that you taught for 30 years, not only them, but Fellowship of Christian Athletes. But we have never talked about that like this, and we've never put it on the air. And I just felt like after seeing all these things on Memorial Day that, I'm grateful that God spared your life. I know a lot of people are. I know your wife is. I know your children are and your grandkids. And what you don't know about Clark, if you don't know him, is he's got, 6, 9. You have 9 grandkids, is that right?
Yeah, correct. 9
grandkids. And so the one who has 3, Brant, also was first in Baghdad as a captain in the Marines, if I remember correctly. Is that true?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, he was in an artillery battery, and once they landed, they marched all the way to Baghdad.
And God spared him in that conflict as well. And I know that God was there when you tripped that booby trap. It didn't go off and different things like that. Was there a clear sense of God's force around you? Was there a clear sense of hell being right there with you? I know it felt like hell.
Well, I think the hardest thing to deal with when you're out in the bush is if you have to. There were places that we had what's called bushwhacking. You had to make your way through thick jungle junk, and if certainly you didn't always want to take the trails where the Vietnamese would take because they knew you were out there, and they could. That's what happened to me. I mean, I was in an area that they set that booby trap up because somebody from the United States or from the Marine Corps, someplace had been in that area before. And, it was just tough to deal with. Another thing was this base I was at, southwest of Da Nang, there was no mess hall. We ate sea rations for 40 some days. And finally, you have to get real creative to eat sea rations for 40 some days. I just will tell you.
I bet you.
And, but eventually they brought in and they constructed a mess hall, and we got bigger tents, and which made it somewhat more livable, but still you weren't there that often, So you always had to be prepared to be on notice that if something happens, they can call your team immediately to be ready to go. Difficult.
Did any of your teammates, did you lose any of them while you were together?
I did not, but I will share this story. I'd been in country and was at the small base camp southwest of Da Nang, and I was sitting by my tent, and I was cleaning my weapon, and a large group of Marines which were infantry. They were walking by, and I just happened to look up, and this other guy looked down, and it was a dear friend. His name was Johnny Blunt. We played football together at Camp Lejeune, And this kid was a great athlete, but he was a super guy and extremely all kinds of athletic ability. And once they got situated, he came back and we sat down and we were both concerned about the difficulties of being in country, what it was like. I know one thing, them assigning, this was, I think, also a godsend, was that I was involved being sent into a recon team, which was a smaller unit where you had greater control in what you were doing. And a lot of times in larger infantry units, it's easy to get scattered all over the place. And if you don't have officers that really have a handle on this, it can be catastrophic. Well, to make a long story short, that unit the next day were caught in a giant ambush by the North Vietnamese, not too far from where we were, and 11 Marines were killed, and he was one of them. And that devastated me, when I found out, and just was really, really difficult to deal with.
I'm sure it was. And that's one thing that was very emotional last night and today, listening to the two different memorial services. Washington, D.C. was just the people that just, lost their men, lost their women, their the women and men that were in harm's way and gave their lives, and the families left behind. And not counting the friends that saw them face to face like you, and then one moment they're alive, the next moment they're gone.
Yeah, they're gone. Yeah, he would have gotten it. I guarantee he would have gotten a football scholarship to a Division I school, and it just didn't happen.
Well, God knows why, and Psalm 139 says He knows our days, He knows they're numbered, He knows them every one. Before there was one.
Yeah.
We don't understand it, we don't get it, but we do know that God loves us. And
yeah, we do.
If it wasn't for that, some of these things would not be bearable.
Yeah. It makes you look, when you come back, it was interesting, the little bitty things that I really appreciated. Living in a dorm with I had another teammate. He was my roommate, and just the freedom that you had, and it was just like I went from hell to heaven, so to speak. About being in school and having friends and teammates, and it was just something even beyond my true understanding of where I came from and where God placed me in. And I've always been extremely grateful, especially meeting Cheryl and getting my education there. Everything was paid for. And so I was very, very fortunate.
Yes, you were, and yes, we are. So, well, Clark, listen, I'm going to close you out because this is a day of family. Did your kids come over today, any of them? Or
no, we had them actually. We had 8 of them here on Friday. They came down, Britton, who is going to flight school in Columbus, Mississippi. He has a girlfriend that's studying to be a veterinarian at Mississippi State. And so he had a friend that was in a wedding, so they came, and then the rest of the crew, except for Trent, who's in Dartmouth, they all were here. we had a house full, and it was fun.
That's awesome. That's amazing. And
I'll tell you a sad thing, Doug. Saturday, I spoke at Jay Watson's funeral. Jay Watson was on the 83 team. He was one of the 2 JV kids that we moved up. And he was an attorney living in Jacksonville. They found him in his home, unresponsive, and he had 2 young girls and his family. And it was not easy,
I'm sure. You've had a lot of students that you've poured your life into, and they are very grateful, and we're sorry to hear about that loss. The great thing is he knew how to live life because of a coach who loved him. Well, Clark, listen, we'll talk to you again soon, though, but anything else? Any final words you want to say?
No, but just I appreciate you, and I often recall all the mighty work that God placed on you and how you handled all of that in the youth movement, which was so spectacular throughout your years of youth ministry, my friend. It was.
Well, we were a real team, Clark. For those of you who don't know, Clark was Fellowship of Christian Athletes before I got here and during that time. And I leaned on you a lot. You saw me at your classroom after school, and you were busy working, but you never told me you were too busy for me. And I appreciate that, because I know there are times you were too busy for me, but you let me come in anyway. And, you went on trips with me. I'll tell you, I was thinking of Dr. Glenn, who's your friend who moved to Colorado, and meeting us out there and skiing with us, and just all kinds of different things that you brought into my life. And the school was more receptive to me because you were there, and because you stuck up for me, and just some great things that God did. And we get to see it on the other side. We get to see your buddy who just went to be with Jesus from your football team, and
Amen.
We're going to be on the other side. We're going to see exactly what happened, because we don't know what all happened yet with the things that we've done. We're going to find out.
Yeah, well, there will be. I was telling them part of the message was there will be the greatest celebration of all celebrations when that day that Jesus does come, and that we have been reunited with our loved ones, so it's all good.
Okay, brother. We'll talk to you a little later. Love you.
All right, Doug. Always love you too. Have a great day.
You've been listening to the Youth Worker on Fire podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and tell your friends. Also, leave a comment and tell us what you think. Stay tuned for more informative episodes.